Okay, so I was working with the navigation stuff. This is video, what is this? 12. We're at video 12 on the RPG course. Of course, we've got our NavMesh. We can bake it. And Rick was showing us about height meshes and minimum region areas to try to get rid of these walkable spaces that are on top of these buildings. Okay, so what we did was we increased the minimum area and then we clicked bake and notice that I got rid of that guy, but I didn't get rid of this one. If I increase this to like 300, okay, I can't get rid of it. I can go to 3,000 and I can't get rid of it. So we need perhaps if we care, we need finer control. And how do we get that? We get that with something called NavMesh components. So the NavMesh components are part of the official Unity documentation, NavMesh building components, surface, modifier, volume, and link, but they're not part of Unity build, okay? They're not part of the Unity build, so you have to get them from the GitHub, all right? There's a link here to the NavMesh components page of the GitHub. So we follow that out. We end up on this deal. And they only have a 2020.1 branch right now. So they don't have a 2020.2 branch. But basically, what you'll do is you'll come down here on this page to where it says README, and then you click on your branch of Unity. So whatever version of Unity is current for you. So 2020.1 for me. And then these are the components. So I'm going to go to Code, and I'm going to click Download Zip. And then I'm going to drag that into... I'm going to open it up, and let's see here. This is the opened up file. You get assets, documentation, packages, project settings. You only need the assets folder. So I dragged the assets folder down here into my assets packs collection, and I renamed it to NavMesh components. So inside NavMesh components, the most important stuff is in the scripts folder of NavMesh components. Okay, and we have several guys here. Let's scroll this down so we can see their names. We have the link, the modifier, the volume, and the surface. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is come to our navigation window and clear the NavMesh. We don't need it. We don't even need the NavMesh window anymore. Instead, we're going to click on our terrain object, and we're going to add component, type in the word nav, and click NavMesh Surface. Now, if we click bake, it's going to bake the NavMesh, and this guy, notice this looks just like the navigation window, except now it is on the terrain object. So if you're thinking that this would allow you to create multiple NavMeshes inside of a scene, you would be correct. You can use this to create multiple NavMeshes in a scene, and I believe Brecky's has a tutorial on this. So the first thing, though, I want to do is I want to restrict the objects that I'm collecting into my NavMesh to the children of my terrain. I have all these objects that I have put as children of the terrain object. So I just click on all and click on children, and then if I re-break it, nothing changes because everything's a child of the terrain object. But if I were to pull one of these buildings, let's see, this guy, if I pull one of these buildings outside of the terrain, and then I rebake it, you'll notice that the mesh goes completely underneath the object. Okay? If I put it back inside as a child of the terrain object and I rebake, boom, okay, we see that I can't go there anymore. Now, how do we get rid of these areas on top of our objects? We have a modifier, a new component called NavMesh Modifier. So if I click on the building, all right, so if I click on the offending building and I add a component, NavMesh Modifier to the building, what I can do now is I can click on Override Area and then select Not Walkable. And now, if I go back to my terrain and I bake my NavMesh, the area for that building is now not walkable. Okay, so what I can do then is come in and override apply all to the prefab. This is the Cinti prefab. So if I apply the NavMesh modifier to the prefab and I click bake, I'm going to lose this area back here as well. Then notice we can also see some blue inside of this hut. Same deal. Add the NavMesh modifier, override area, not walkable, and apply to all of the hut prefabs. And then come back to our terrain and again see the blue down here in this area. If I click bake, no, it didn't go away. That's fun. Must be some other issue going on there. Or maybe I can get inside the building. That's curious. Oh, it's because there's no floor to the building. Awesome. Okay, well, cool. There's no floor to that building, so that's why that didn't delete. Okay, awesome. Well, there you go. In that case, you would want to use a volume. If I go to add NavMesh Modifier volume, and I click Edit Volume. Okay, where is it at? Whoops. Where did that model? Oh, I see what happened. Remove that component. I want to put it on the building. Add volume. Okay, and then if I click Edit Volume, you see this bounding box here. I can drag it out. Okay, and then let's see if I can. Yeah, it looks like it kind of goes through the floor, but we can drag it down a little bit more. Okay, so if I do that, and then I set the modifier to not walkable. Okay, well, whoops. Get my mouse going here. There we go. All right, so we're on the NavMesh. So I've applied that volume, and now if I bake the surface, I should be able to get rid of that. Yep, there, it's gone. Okay, so I use the NavMesh modifier volume to make that not walkable. But if you come over here, see this house still has one. So what do? We go apply all, and then back to the terrain object and bake it. And now we got rid of that part. So these guys allow us, these components allow us just a little finer control over whether or not an object is going to be, well, that's fun. There's a height problem right here with these guys. This is related to the height setting, the 45-degree slope. It's detecting a slope there. So again, for these guys, now what might be fun for them is if they were destructible. So what we can do there is we can make these guys a NavMesh obstacle. And if we do that, that should, yeah, all right, so that's cool. So now he's, if you notice the mesh area around him, okay, the NavMesh doesn't include that guy anymore, all right? It goes actually right underneath him. So we want to carve, okay, and then that will do, yeah, there, so that carved out an area around it. But what's cool here is that if we move this to a new spot, okay, we don't actually need to rebake the NavMesh, it just carves that area out. So it's kind of real-time NavMesh modification. Of course, that comes with its own computation costs, but that's the way you could do that. And then I can come up to my object, my box here, and override that. Okay, and then if we look at our NavMesh, boom, now that's carved out as well. So what's really cool here is if one of these guys is destroyed in the game, so like if this box is destructible and you destroy it, this area that's carved out will be, it will be part of the NavMesh again. So that's how you can create like temporary objects and stuff like that. Again, Breakease has a cool tutorial on this. You should check that out. But I just wanted to kind of show you another way to go about setting up your NavMeshes.